what is your job here?
I'm the natural history curator here at the museum. So my collection contains all of the animal, vegetable, and mineral objects. So anything not related to humans.
What degree do you need to do this job, and how many years of schooling?
Well, curator positions usually have at least a master's, sometimes a PhD. I have a bachelor's degree in geology, a master's degree in biology, and a master's degree in science education. So that's a grand total of about 10 years of schooling in college.
Okay, yeah. That's
So,
what I mean. So, what's a curator?
so curators are people employed at museums, libraries, places like that are in charge with organizing collections as well as preserving them and making sure they're going to be available for generations in the future.
How many hours do you work?
I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, so I put in 40 hours a week. And that's not counting, sometimes I go out into the field looking for fossils on my own time.
Okay. What are the exciting parts of this job?
Some of the most exciting parts are, so this museum has actually existed since 1773 as a collection. It's very old. It wasn't open to the public until later, but that means we have some objects in the collections that are incredibly old. And this museum started off as a natural history collection, so some of my stuff is some of the oldest. What's really interesting about that, though, is some of that stuff, it's been in storage for so long. It's in the records, but no one's seen it for decades. And then when I'm organizing and preparing specimens for exhibits, sometimes you come across those really rare, really old things. It's super exciting because you kind of forget you even have them.
Yeah, cool.
And they even have notes handwritten by the people who originally collected them in the 1800s.
Wow.
Some of that's on display with the specimens that are up here.
So what have you found in storage that is the most interesting?
So the thing that I found most recently, we were going through looking for some specimens put on display a couple years ago when we renovated the museum. And one of the objects actually has notes by one of our most earliest naturalists. He's actually one of the first curators of the museum. And it's handwritten notes on a whale species
Wow.
that ended up being the first of its kind ever described. So that's really neat. And then one other object, when I was still in college in Georgia, I actually came up here and helped a hobbyist fossil collector excavate part of a giant ground sloth.
Whoa.
After it was excavated, I didn't know quite where it was going to be donated to or whatnot, but it was part of my college project. When I started my job here, I found it is actually in our collections.
That's
So
wow.
before I even got this job, I helped build this collection up, and that ground sloth's still there, and at some point he's going to probably be up on display.
What kind of jobs can you get if you have a degree in geology?
There's a wide range of careers in geology. Obviously, museum curator is a possibility. There's petroleum geologists. Those are the people that actually work with mining crews to collect oil shale for mining oil. Volcanologists study volcanoes, obviously. Petrologists, they also study igneous rocks. Gemologists actually work in the jewelry fields, so they actually help. They're the ones that certify gemstones at jewelry stores. And then also, since geology, most people think about rocks and minerals, but actually a lot of things that have to do with the non-biological aspects of Earth fall under geology.
Really?
Yes, so meteorologists, people who study the weather, are actually a branch of geology. Hydrologists, people who deal with how water moves and usually are consultants on building hydroelectric dams, that's in geology as well. So specifically, it's like 4 or 5. I wanted specifically to be a paleontologist, which is it's another one of those branches that kind of falls under geology. The aspects that are related to geology have to do with like dating fossils and knowing what layers they come from. But because I was so interested in fossils, it was pretty easy to also be interested in rocks. So when I was a little kid, I had a pretty big rock collection. So so you've got one too. They're fun to collect. There's some really interesting looking crystals and things that you can have, and honestly, just wanting to learn more about why they look different. Why they have their different properties, why they show up in different places and not others, and then also the fact that fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. All of that kind of stoked my interest in geology, which is why I went for that as my first degree.
Do you ever travel for your job, and if you do, where?
Most of the travel is actually pretty local. So I go around and I'm specifically looking at the geology and paleontology of the Charleston area. But I do sometimes go outside the state, and sometimes that's mainly for my own personal research and collecting. So like last year I went up to North Carolina to go to a fossil site. But then I also sometimes go to conferences, so to meet with other geologists and paleontologists to talk about breakthroughs in our field and new discoveries. That takes me all over the U.S. So I think the farthest I've been so far was Utah. I haven't quite made it all the way to the West Coast yet, but it's just a matter of time.
What's your dream project for a geologist?
Well, so far, most of the excavations I've done around here are just sampling. I go out there and just poke around and see what's exposed and what I can find. One of the things I want to do in the future is have a legitimate survey dig. So like the ones you see on TV where they go out and they have the grid set up and they're taking notes for each particular plot of land they're pulling specimens out of. To get a better understanding of how these fossils and rocks are all arranged, how the sediment layers interact with each other, because sometimes they dip lower than others, sometimes they're present in some areas but not others. And then also, part of that, I've been talking with someone who wants to get a National Science Foundation grant to do that kind of dig, but do it on, say, school property. So if there's a school that has an area where they're, I don't know, maybe they're expanding their sports fields or something. Dig a big hole.
At my school in the front, there's this big empty space where because there used to be that used to be the old school, and then they built another one there. So there's just we knocked down that, and now there's just a big.
And that's the kind of thing we'd be looking for, so that we can do the dig on the school site if we know that the school is somewhere where fossil layers are present, and then classes could come out and ask us questions, see if we actually find anything. You never know, you might not, but at the very least they can come and see us doing actual science in the field.
Yeah.
And then you get here, you can kind of tell a little bit about the habitat. So yeah, this was an ocean habitat. At least this was more kind of a reef habitat, similar to what you see if you go to the beach today. Whereas, yep, that's mud. And some of these even have little impressions in them because animals do burrow in and out of these things. So you get